If you are starting your handstand journey, there's probably one thing you're trying to avoid at all costs, and that's the ugly banana shape or the infamous closed shoulders. So you probably think that closed shoulders are bad and to be avoided, and open shoulders are good, the holy grail of handstand. Well, let me try to prove you wrong. In this video, we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of having open and closed shoulders and go into details you probably haven't heard before. I'm going to show you what you can do if you have closed shoulders, figure out whether or not you actually have open or closed shoulders, and even more importantly, tell you why chasing the open shoulder position is probably the worst thing you can do for your handstand. So first thing first, let's start with some definitions. Open and closed shoulders refer to the angle we see between the arm and the torso. If you look at your handstand sideways and you draw a line from your hand to the shoulders and another one from the shoulders to the pelvis, you will have an angle. In the context of handstands, if that angle is less than 180 degrees, we call that closed shoulders. If it's 180 degrees, we call that open shoulder. And so obviously what we already see is that when the shoulders are open, the pelvis is stacked, located on top of the shoulders. And so if we are after something very straight, we understand that we are going to require open shoulder. Now we have to make a subtle distinction here. A handstand can be held with closed shoulders or open shoulders or anywhere in between, but not everyone can perform both. When we have closed shoulders, it means that if we test our shoulder mobility in the context of handstands, we cannot achieve that 180 degree angle at our shoulders. If we have open shoulders, we can perform anything from the closed shoulder angle all the way up to the very open shoulder angle. So there's such a thing as open and closed shoulders handstands, and people who have open shoulders and people who have closed shoulders. If you have closed shoulders, you simply lack the mobility to fully open them, anatomically speaking, to be able to achieve the straight line. However, you have to stop thinking that you need to be as open as possible to hold a handstand. Holding a handstand is not the same thing as being as close as possible to your maximum range of motion while upside down. To simplify things for today, understand that even if I had closed shoulders, I could put my body in different positions. Very closed shoulders, somehow closed shoulders, and closed-ish shoulders. Even if I can't fully open my shoulders, I already have a lot of options at my disposal, and I should get good at holding each one of them before I worry too much about opening my shoulders further. The journey, the progressions between shoulder extension and flexion, or closed shoulders, open shoulders, is actually a continuum. And the most open of what you can do today is nothing else but one point of that continuum, located at the end of it. Hand balancing, however, exists throughout this continuum, and you are much better off figuring out the point on that line that suits you best, that maximizes your chances at holding a consistent and long handstand that you can then transform and sculpt into something as beautiful as you want, rather than obsessing over the end point of that line. Actually, even if you have open shoulders, you probably will realize that the first handstand you should master, the first handstand you should practice, is not an open shoulder handstand. Why do we emphasize so much this distinction between open and closed? One reason is many well-intentioned guides and tutorials and courses and coaches out there tend to put too much attention on the superficial layers of hand balancing, forgetting the core of what makes or breaks a handstand, the biomechanical rules that govern anything that is to be held upside down. So while it is true that having open shoulders will be required for some alignment, and it is true that the more open your shoulders, the straighter you will look, it is not true that straight equals easy to balance. And to me, that's a huge problem, because instead of trying to find something that works for you, instead of coaching you specifically with your strengths and weaknesses towards achieving a handstand that works for you, we hold open shoulders as being the holy grail, the standard for perfection without which there is nothing. And that's actually not true at all. Another reason is that through a course or a YouTube video, most people don't have the time to delve into the details. It's actually a topic which is more complex than it looks. And so in order to not lose 90% of the viewers with their very short attention span, people are just better off sticking to TikTok-like videos. The truth of the matter is 90% of people won't achieve the handstands for that precise reason, because they don't take the time to think about what they're doing. And hopefully, since you're still here watching this, you're one of those 10%. And demanding of yourself that you only hold the best line possible would only make sense if you were interviewing for the next Cirque du Soleil show, or if you had 2 hours per day to train, in which case fine, you could raise the bar that high and expect to only achieve the best results possible. But chances are neither of those things apply to you. Therefore, I'm going to kindly ask you to stop wasting your time and stretching the hell out of your shoulders, because having them more open will not make a big difference in how easy it is to hold a handstand in the first place. Actually, not only open shoulders are not required to hold a handstand, but in many cases, the more open the shoulders and the harder it is to hold your first handstand. The main reason for that being, with closed shoulders, we'll feel stronger and safer, and fear is a big component of achieving your first 10 freestanding seconds. So why then should we bother about opening the shoulders at all? Well, to me, there are two main reasons. One, very viable, and the other a bit more debatable. The good reason why you should try to open your shoulders at some point, at a specific point of your journey, is that the more you open the shoulders when you perform a shoulder flexion, and the better the pelvis stacks itself over the shoulders. And the pelvis, well, is not that light. If it's not over the shoulders, it's probably dragging you down to the floor, which means that you will have to compensate to hold those alignments, either with your shoulder strength, which usually leads to plunged handstands, or with your leg or legs position going further past the vertical axis, leading sometimes to banana shape. So the more open the shoulders and the more control we have over where the pelvis sits in space. This can be desirable in many ways. And for some positions, it actually would be required unless you are extremely flexible in the lower back region. For instance, for pike shapes, for most of us who are not super duper flexible, we will need open shoulders for our tuck, our straddle, our diamond. The other reason is that the more open the shoulders and the straighter you will look. And if holding a very straight line is a goal of yours, well, you will need that eventually. However, just remember that the obsession over the straightest line that we find on social media is quite new in the world of hand balancing, and not so long ago, holding a slightly banana-shaped handstand was perfectly acceptable in the performance context. While I'm speaking about that, also remember that closed shoulders doesn't mean more beginner. Look at this picture and tell me this is a beginner handstand. It is not. Some very contortion-oriented handstands actually involve you having quite closed shoulders. So I hope by now you have started questioning your belief systems around open and closed shoulders, and you've started accepting what you have if you have closed shoulders. The test for your mobility is actually quite widespread on YouTube. I'm going to give you a recap here. With that, you will know if you have closed or open shoulders. Stand upright, back facing the wall, with your feet 1 foot away from the wall. From that position, lean against the wall in such a way that your pelvis, your butt, the upper back, and your head are all touching the wall. You're going to start tilting your pelvis back and forth, going from a posterior to an anterior pelvic tilt. And we have a guest. Going from a posterior to an anterior pelvic tilt. You should feel that the arch in your lower back changes. I want that lower back, I want your lumbars to be pressed against the floor and stay there as long as possible, because what we're testing is, are you able to keep your shoulders open while maintaining a posterior pelvic tilt, which is held as the holy grail on social media today. Without arching that lower back, without bending your elbows, without bringing your hands further away than shoulder width. You're gonna bring your hands up and try to find the wall behind you with the back of your hand. If you can find that wall with no problem, then you have open shoulders. If it's impossible or hard, then you have closed shoulders in the context of handstand. Again, this just shows you the end point of your continuum. It doesn't mean that you should practice there. And this is maybe the most important point of this video. When I work with people in person and online through my Rocket course, we work on finding the alignment that suits them. And this starts by acknowledging that the way you have been practicing is probably all over the shop. You probably are, without even knowing it, jumping from one point on that line to the other, practicing different alignments without even realizing it, and delaying your progress in the process. To simplify things, your mission is to find where things start getting easier for you when it comes to holding a handstand on that continuum. For some people, it will be with very close shoulders. For others, it will be with more open shoulders. For most, it will be somewhere in between. The way you have to place yourself will vary depending on where you are. And that's because when the shoulders open, the pelvis stacks itself more or less optimally over the shoulders, and the legs have to react accordingly. So that's the equation you want to remember. My shoulders dictate where my pelvis is. My pelvis dictates where my legs have to be. And so things are already hard enough when it comes to balancing a handstand with one unchanging position. If, without even realizing it, you keep changing the rules of the game because you keep practicing different alignments, because you keep jumping from one point on that line to the other, from one shoulder angle to another, you are going to slow down massively your progress. So you need to be consistent. This is one of my golden rules of handstand. There's a handful of them. But rule number 3 is congruency. You have to make sure that the handstand you are practicing day in and day out, from one day to the other, from one session to the other, and within your session, when you kick up against the wall, when you try to balance against the wall, when you go chest to the wall, and or when you freestand, when you are able to freestand, you have to make sure that all those handstands look the same. And it starts at the shoulder angle. If your shoulders are more open in one scenario, let's say chest to the wall, than another, let's say freestanding, you are delaying your progress. You need to fix that tomorrow. Film yourself. Whatever you can do, whatever drills you are able to perform, film yourself and tell me if we see the exact same handstand, back to the wall, chest to the wall, and freestand. If the answer is no, instead of overthinking the open shoulder argument, try to find the one that suits you the best. Try to find the one that you feel the strongest in. Try to find the one that you can balance the easiest in. Tell me which shoulder angle you are better able to control in your kick-up. Tell me which shoulder angle makes you feel safer when you freestand. It's absolutely essential that you solve that equation if you want to achieve what I call in my Rocket course the freestanding freedom standard, which is 15 seconds freestanding 70 to 80% of the time. Once you have achieved that foundation, you can conquer any goal you want, whether it is walking on your hands, pressing, shape-shifting, you name it. Your mission and my goal as a coach is to make the journey to that point as quick and painless as possible. And it starts with you ditching that obsession around being perfectly straight and starting to be realistic about what works for you. Now, I did say I would finish this video talking about what I would do if I were you to open the shoulders, but I hope that you understand that this can only be something that supplements your practice and shouldn't be the core of your practice unless you already have achieved that 10 to 15 second freestanding consistent handstand. There's 2 main avenues to open the shoulders in a smart way. One is to practice more inversions, specifically chest to the wall. When you are chest to the wall, you are better able to bring your attention on alignment, to go as far towards the extremity of that continuum as you can and hold at positions for time. It is the exposure and the time under tension in those more and more open positions which eventually will make your brain feel safe in those and allow your body to open up into more and more open positions. And of course, given everything we've said, this involves some risks. If your continuum keeps growing, your perception of where you should be on that line will be a bit blurred. And that's why if I were you, I would first consolidate a reliable freestanding handstand before I start messing with your proprioception. I have seen this time and time again. Being willing too soon, too early on your journey to open your shoulders or achieve something more open at the expense of your consistency. Between being straight but only sticking your handstand once a blue moon and having a handstand that has room for improvement when it comes to alignment, but being able to perform it whenever you want, wherever you want, there's only one of those two options which is rewarding. The other drill I would advise you to do, provided you have a good shoulder strengthening, conditioning, prehab routine, would be elevated bridges. Again, you can find many drills about this on internet. The premise is simply you putting your feet on a stack of boxes or a couch or a bed to ensure that you're working more around the shoulder and thoracic spine area, more so than the lower back, and going up into a bridge from this position, holding it for something like 8 to 12 seconds for a couple of sets. If you have any questions, please drop a comment below. If you are interested in me helping you figure out what your handstand is and therefore what are the best drills for you and how you can design a training workout, a training program that works for you and allows you to get to your goals in the fastest way possible, you can also check out the curriculum of my Rocket coaching program in the link below. Have fun and see you all soon.